Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode. On the show today, we're looking at Strider on the NES, which was released by Capcom back in 1989, not too long after the arcade game had hit its stride. Get it? This iteration of Strider, however, really doesn't have much to do with the arcade version at all, and is more so based on the original manga, unlike the excellent Sega Genesis version that's basically just a direct port of the arcade classic. One odd thing worth noting about the NES version of Strider is that it never ended up getting released overseas, even though that's where the original manga had come from. It was originally scheduled to, but was delayed and then eventually cancelled. But that wouldn't stop us here in the US from getting a localized port of the game in 1989. The storyline in the NES rendition of Strider centers around our hero Kiryu, say that 5 times fast, who's a member of the secret high-tech ninja troupe known as the Striders. Kiryu is beckoned forth by his superiors to assassinate his former Strider ally Kain, who's been captured by enemy forces and since become a dangerous liability for the organization. Strider is still very much so an action game at its core, but it does have some unique features that do make it stand out a bit from a lot of the other games in the genre on the NES. Our hero's weapon of choice is his Cypher, which is a kind of plasma sword that can be used to slash through enemies and even be upgraded later in the game to shoot plasma arrows. The game consists of several different stages that are represented as geographical locations on a world map from your hub inside of the Blue Dragon, which is essentially just a giant spaceship that here you can sort of beam down from. The object of the game is to find specific items and clues to proceed in the story, so you'll be visiting most of the stages more than once, not unlike Bionic Commando. Strider is definitely a game that can be overly cryptic at times too, and is one of those games that confused me as a kid on more than one occasion. Without the helpful aid of a magazine or an online walkthrough, it can be pretty frustrating. For example, in a lot of the stages, you have to backtrack all the way back to the beginning of the level and jump at the leftmost side of the screen to beam back up to the Blue Dragon and move to another level. I remember it taking me forever as a kid to just accidentally find that out, since a lot of the games you would rent as a kid, at least when I was a kid, just didn't come with manuals. As far as the items and abilities go, you'll find floppy disks that can be analyzed for clues when back in the hub, and these can help point you in the right direction as far as choosing which level to tackle next, or which item to look for. In addition, you'll also find keys by talking to certain characters or defeating bosses, which will then open up different series of doors in specific stages. Along the way, you'll also level up and gain new abilities that can be accessed with the menu button. The abilities utilize the energy counter underneath your health indicator and can be used for a variety of purposes, like healing or even quick warping back out to your ship, which can be really helpful when you're in a bind. The control scheme in Strider is pretty basic, using A to jump and B to attack, but the controls themselves are a little bit twitchy. The jumping in the game feels really weird at times, and it's hard to gauge where you need to be in order to make a lot of the jumps in the game. Speaking of jumping, Kiryu also has the ability to do what's called a triangle jump, which is basically just a wall jump, but it takes quite a bit of practice to get it down just right. Unfortunately, there's really no way around it either. There are certain parts of the game where you just have to use it. Graphically, Strider on the NES looks pretty good. It's most certainly not one of the best looking games on the NES, however, due to an inordinate amount of flicker and just general glitchiness. The stages all look nice and each one has its own style, but the hit detection on the character sprites is insanely goofy at best, which can make the game needlessly frustrating at times. The sound effects and music, in typical Capcom fashion, are excellent though. All of the music in the game is memorable and well composed, and the sound effects are all adequate without ever becoming obnoxious or sounding out of place. So, in conclusion, Strider on the NES is a good game. It's not a perfect game by any means, and definitely has more than its share of flaws, from awkward hit detection to spotty and sometimes unresponsive controls. Even still, it's a fun and rewarding game with a great sense of style and a stellar soundtrack. I would recommend Strider for anyone who's a fan of the arcade version, if not just to see the different story and gameplay angle, and to anyone who enjoys action-adventure games on the NES. The NES version of Strider may not hold up as well as its Genesis cousin, but it's still a great and ambitious game that deserves to be in everyone's NES collection. As always, guys, I'd like to thank each and every one of you for watching and subscribing, and until next time, stay classic.